You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest State Senator Bill Brady. He's a Republican from Bloomington. He ran for governor in the Republican primary in 2006. It is all but certain he'll be running again in the Republican primary in 2010. That primary is in February of 2010, so we're taping this show on December 7th, 2008. So we'll be getting ready and finding out about that race and who else might be running in the Republican primary against or with Bill Brady, however you want to put it, who might be running on the Democratic side, and just how things shake out, because, you know, there's no end to this. We do politics, we do public policy. We've just been through a major national election. We have a president-elect, and people would think, give people a break. But it just goes nonstop, and that's what you're going to be seeing. Illinois government, some would say, is in a mess. We'll be talking about that, whether it's revenue, whether it's spending, whether it's social issues. They would say the Republican Party is a house divided. We'll be talking about that. They're talking about the schisms that might exist in the Republican Party, the incompetent government that might be the Democratic government. I guess that's what we can call it. So all of that, don't turn that dial, and just, we'll get right to it. The thing to know about Bill Brady, just talking before the show, he was in the State House for 8 years, took 2 years off for good behavior when he ran for Congress, did not win in that race for the congressional seat now held by Tim Johnson, right?
Correct.
Back in the state Senate for 6 years, in the last 6 years, and lifelong resident of Bloomington, Illinois.
That's right.
Central Catholic High School, Illinois Wesleyan University, ranking Republican on a number of committees. We'll come back to that. But right now, what people want to know as we get into the show, you're trying to get your campaign for governor. We'll see that probably in January or February. Maybe you'll announce it today. But it's kind of been blocked by Paul Caprio, who's Mr. Traditional Values. He is the executive director of Family-PAC. And a lot of people wouldn't know about this. But, you know, the saying used to be from Henry Kissinger is that the reason why university politics is so vicious is that so little is at stake. And now that's what people are saying about the Republican Party. The reason why the internal politics within the Republican Party is so vicious because some think so little is at stake. And for people who weren't following this, and just a few weeks ago, the Republicans elected what we used to call the Senate Minority Leader, what you now call, I guess, the Senate Republican Leader. There are only 22 state senators, and they voted 12-8 in favor of Chris Radogno to become the Senate Republican Leader, and Kirk Dillard lost with 8 votes, and Bill Brady abstained. And Paul Caprio, executive director of Family-PAC, as he said, he views himself as the defender of traditional family values. He went irate because you abstained, and he thought you were there to support family values. He thinks Chris Radogno is going to be a disaster as a leader. We'll see. But that's Caprio's view. He thought he could count on you, and he said you were just sitting on the fence. Now he said when you sent him a letter asking for a contribution, he said he was insulted. Stay away from him. Don't call him. Don't darken his door, whatever. And so is that any way to kick off a campaign for governor, Senator Bill Brady?
Well, what Paul Caprio does is up to him. You know Paul as well as I do. But what we're doing is traveling the state, using this gubernatorial election to rebuild the Republican Party, to put forward candidates around the state in 2010 who are going to help us return Illinois to a state of prosperity. We've done a lot of laying the groundwork. We used the 2008 elections to get some of that done, and we're going to move forward. Mr. Caprio can do and say what he wants. My strong record as a pro-family Republican is there. It exists.
Pro-family, what is that? Break it down. Is that gays, guns, God, and abortion?
Well, I think it's about doing what you can do to instill a stronger family unit in Illinois by government staying out and allowing families to do that. Now, am I pro-life? Yes. I'm born, raised Roman Catholic, been pro-life all my life.
Do you think abortion should be illegal?
Do I think? Yes.
And what exceptions, if any, for abortion?
Well, I've long said that there shouldn't really be any exceptions.
What about the life of the mother?
Well, certainly the life of the mother. That's different. And there's obviously...
But no exceptions
but the
for
truth
rape.
of
The
truth of the matter is, though, on this issue, is what we need to do is common sense initiatives like parental involvement in a child's health care. The fact that minor children can go out and get an abortion without their parent knowing about it, but they can't go out and get their ear pierced without their parent knowing about it is a ridiculous law. Well, common sense approaches.
Isn't there a law in Illinois that was passed and didn't go to the Supreme Court to issue regulations, and didn't they do that? And what's happened? Why is the parental notice law that was passed by the legislature, 10 years ago, not being enforced?
Well, I think the Attorney General's to blame. I think
what has to be done?
Well,
give us an update right on that.
Rules for implementation have to be put into place, and that means the Supreme Court and the Attorney General need to come to terms. And clearly, Lisa Madigan has dragged her feet. And
she's drugged her feet?
Dragged her feet.
Is that what they
dragged
say
her
down
feet.
in Bloomington?
No,
That's
not drugged. Not drugged. Dragged her feet on this initiative. We differ on this. I believe that a parent should be involved in the health care decisions of a minor child. Those are family values that we're talking about.
So she's dragging her feet in terms of getting those regulations. She's barring
rules in place.
Barring who's supposed to issue those regulations?
Well, a combination, I think, of the Attorney General's office and the Supreme Court.
Okay, and so you would be out there pushing her to do this?
Absolutely.
Are you talking about it?
This was supported nearly a decade ago by the Illinois General Assembly and the governor at that time.
Okay, so that's one thing, focus on parental notice, but getting back, you said you'd allow an exception for the life of the mother to have an abortion, but no exception for rape or incest?
Well, let's look at it this way. Anything we can do that reduces abortions in Illinois, we start with parental involvement, and we continue to move. Let's face it, this General Assembly and the Supreme Court of the United States will have a lot to say about how far we go there. And regardless of my personal position as a Roman Catholic, but I don't think there's any stone talking about that. Let's incrementally move
let's get
in the
an
direction
answer to the question, and then we'll move on. But what is your position? You've said your philosophy is you would allow an abortion for the life of the mother.
I'm personally pro-life.
So no exceptions other than the life of the mother, not for rape or incest.
It's the way I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and I'm personally pro-life.
All right, but your point in general you're making, I didn't mean to cut you off, is
that's okay.
Is your point is that's not going to come up. This legislature, which is dominated by Democrats and in large part, well, at least upstate, by pro-choice Democrats. I guess there are some pro-life Democrats.
Sure there are.
In the state Senate and maybe even in the state House. Right?
Absolutely.
Mostly downstate. I don't know of anybody who's pro-life who's a Democrat upstate.
From the city of Chicago?
Who's a Democrat?
I think Reverend Meeks might be.
That's true. That's a good exception. I'm glad you pointed that out. But other than Reverend Meeks, perhaps not?
You know, I have not taken a litmus test and don't know about every member.
All right, so that's...
But I would hope most of them would agree with common sense approaches to reduce the number of abortions.
You know what Caprio was saying, the reason why the Senate Republican leader is important, he says, and now that's Chris Radogno, who's pro-choice, pro-gay rights, pro-gun control, he says, that person has to be going out and recruiting candidates and getting people who can win. Caprio thinks pro-life candidates can win upstate and downstate.
He's right.
And he's saying, he's implying, if not saying, Radogno is not the person to recruit those people to run as the state Senate. Is Caprio right about that?
Well, no, I don't think so.
You think Chris will do fine?
I think
you
Chris
abstain, but you think she'll do fine.
I told Chris and I told Kurt Dillard that I could support either one of them. That I was focused, though, on using the campaign for governor to rebuild the party. Most important thing we can do as a party in this state is elect a Republican governor. That will give us the ability to stop terrible initiatives by the Democratic control of this state, and it will allow us a platform to talk about initiatives that will return Illinois to a state of prosperity. That's the most important thing that can be done for the Illinois Senate Republicans, the Illinois House Republicans, the people of Illinois.
But she has said, as you may know, I think this was before the election, Senator Radogno has said, you know, same-sex marriage is kind of like seatbelts and no smoking on airplanes. Eventually, we're going to have that.
I've never heard her say that.
But that was reported that.
I've never heard her say that.
Well, we can get that direct quote.
Yeah.
But if she did say that, would that bother you?
Yes.
And what would you do? Would you talk to her about that?
I have sponsored a constitutional amendment to Illinois' Constitution to make marriage constitutionally protected under the redundantly, make marriage a protected institution, sacred between a man and a woman. And I will continue to support those initiatives.
A constitutional amendment in Illinois. So those are your credentials, but your critics say, well, why didn't you stand up at that time and not abstain? They said you should have. If you're going to be a candidate...
Don't say critics. The only person I know who said anything is a gentleman you talked about
earlier.
I think
Dan Proft also weigh in on this issue? I thought he did.
Haven't heard.
I thought he was weighing in that if you're going to run for governor, you got to show leadership. You can't sit on the fence.
Listen,
and
in the case of Chris Radogno and Kirk Dillard, both have helped me in my campaign in running for governor.
But it's not about help, it's a matter of what's showing
It's about bringing a party together. It's about allowing the Senate Republican caucus and the members who are going to be there to duly elect their leader. I'm hoping, frankly, that I won't be a member of the caucus in 2 years.
So you want to bring together, somehow unite the Republican Party, both the pro-life and pro-choice elements? Is that what you're talking about? Pro-gay rights, no special rights for
wait a second.
homosexuals.
I don't know where you're talking about. I've got a
well, I've
got a pro-life record. I've got a record of saying no special rights for any groups.
But you just talked about uniting the Republican Party, right?
Yes, and unite the Republican Party by bringing forward candidates statewide who support the Republican Party platform, and that's what I intend to be. A Republican nominee for governor who supports the Republican Party platform by bringing the base of our party together. And frankly, that way we win elections is to bring the base of our party together and then use that base to, in fact, elicit support and value from the moderates and independents. And frankly, some of the Democrats, particularly the downstate Democrats.
So use the base to win over pro-choice supporters within the Republican Party as well as independents and Democrats.
To provide value. To provide value. That's right.
And even those who don't agree with you, those who think that same-sex marriage is a good thing, those who think civil unions is a good thing.
There are many people who think same-sex marriage is a good thing.
Those who perhaps think civil unions are a good thing, right? There are many of those.
Many of those either. Most people think civil unions is just another name for same-sex marriage.
Really?
So,
you don't think
well,
most
just
Democrats
look at the last
support
3 elections in other states on the issue of marriage.
You know, virtually every presidential candidate in the Democratic Party, and there were 8, maybe 1 supported same-sex marriage. The others all supported civil unions. The major candidates, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Edwards, they got pretty good followings, and you're telling me out there in America nobody supports civil unions, even though the 3 major Democratic candidates?
I didn't say nobody. I didn't say that.
So do you have
what
to,
I simply said is the public
believes,
I believe, the public believes that marriage ought to be protected.
Let's go on. Are you telling me, it sounds a little bit, you started out talking about economic issues as you travel the state of Illinois, as you campaign for governor, which is going to start in January, February, right?
Well, we've been laying the groundwork longer than that.
Okay. No, but you'll be officially announcing your candidacy for governor in January,
we
February
intend to have an
2009?
announcement after the inauguration, sometime in late January, early February.
And as you do that, do you think you're going to be focusing on the economic issues or on the social issues?
There's no question that what's most important right now is the economic issues. Illinois, under the current Democratic control, I'm not going to call it leadership because leadership would have moved us forward, but under the current Democratic control, they've cost this state and its citizens over 700,000 jobs. By imposing penalties on businesses for making an investment in Illinois.
What would be the unemployment rate? Right now in Illinois, it's at least 7.3%, right? Mm-hmm. Higher than the national average, which is 6.7%. We don't know what is in Illinois yet. It's going to be announced in a few weeks. Right. But higher, presumably, 7.3%. And you're saying 700,000 jobs. Part of that, or part of the result, one result of that, I think I've heard you say, is that we have this major deficit in the fiscal year 2009 state budget.
Absolutely.
What is it, $4 billion, $5 billion? What's the deficit?
It's probably at least $4 billion. The
governor
continues to hide appropriate information from us to know exactly how bad the situation is.
$4 billion, that's a whopping, because really, even if it's a $60 billion budget, but only $30 billion is the operating fund.
You're approximately right.
The discretionary amount.
That's right.
So it's like $4 billion out of the $30 billion is, we're in a hole, right?
That's right.
More than a 10%, in a sense, more than a 10% deficit.
These Democrats who've been in control for the last 6 years have continued to spend more money than we've had. They've continued to penalize businesses who wanted to make an investment in Illinois. And this vicious cycle has cost us the 700,000 jobs, which means we have 700,000 families in Illinois without a quality of life that's associated with a job. We've lost over $3 billion in revenue just this year, not to mention the incremental loss in the last 6 years by not having those jobs.
So much of the deficit could be covered just by having those jobs, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And
Not
controlling
all,
spending. Imagine if you put 700,000 people back to work, or you allow the business community to put them back to work, they're less reliant on government services and government costs.
So what do you do, though, for the next 10 or 11 months? You're not going to get 700,000 people employed. So how are you going to, in 11 months, maybe eventually you will. So what do you do to deal with the $4 billion deficit?
Cut spending.
In the state? By $4 billion?
Balance the budget. We've got an obligation to the people.
Can you tell people where you would cut the $4 billion?
We'd eliminate some of the programs, Governor Blagojevich. We'd reform our medical system. We could save over $1 billion by simply reforming our medical system.
Billion. Kirk Dillard upped you on that, and he said $2 billion.
Well,
managing health care, managing Medicaid.
You're
saying
so
$1 billion.
I know
you would agree with
we could save over
$1
billion.
Over $1 billion.
Yes.
What about the other $3 billion for the deficit? What do you do about that?
Well, some people are going to have to take a haircut.
Like who?
Just like the business world is.
Scale back on education.
Scale back salary increases. The education community may have to take it. We can't continue to spend resources we don't have. We owe it to the taxpayers of this state to live within our means. And if social services have to take a cut, everyone should have to take part of it.
The new Senate president is John Cullerton. You know Johnny.
I do.
I think that's how you referred to him. I'm using your reference, right? Johnny?
Well,
you guys are friends? You
now,
call him Johnny
now
and he
Mr.
calls
President.
you Bill? Now Mr. President. No more Johnny for you, right? All right, so the Senate president, John Cullerton, I've heard him say everything's on the table, including an increase in the income tax. In fact, he said on this show 7 or 8 months ago, if he had been governor in 2002, he would have increased the income tax then. I take it you differ with Senate President Cullerton?
Every time you hear me speak, Illinois can ill afford to increase tax rates on families and on businesses in this state. It's time for us to right-size state government and, in fact, reduce tax and fees on businesses so they'll make that investment we need them to make. If the Democrats increase taxes again and again, like they have continued to do, we will continue to lose the opportunity to create reasons for businesses to invest in Illinois. The real solution to raising revenues, to balancing our budget, is to create an environment where businesses will employ people. And that's what we've seen these short-sighted policies put in place by the Democratic control, mostly in the northeast corner of this state, that have cost us dearly jobs.
So you're unalterably opposed to an increase in the state income tax?
Absolutely. The worst thing we can do is increase tax rates on businesses and families.
What about the state sales tax? Are you unalterably opposed to an increase in the state sales tax?
Yes, we can't do that either. We are in an area with one of the highest sales tax rates of any community in the country, and it's hurting Chicago retailers. The 10% sales tax rate imposed on products here is causing retailers in the city to lose purchases to other states
it's even
and
higher
other
in
cities.
Chicago when they have a restaurant tax. So if you go to a restaurant, it's 11.5%.
Yeah.
Certain beverage products are taxed at
Right.
14.5%. So 10% actually understates. If people
Yeah.
go to a restaurant, folks, in Chicago, and you hear 10%, but look at your bill. And recently, a takeout restaurant, buy something for $8.68, and you know what your bill is? $9.68. I actually looked at this recently.
Yeah.
So that's 11.5%. And then if you buy a soft drink, 14.5%. So your point, that has the effect eventually on the economy, a little bit here, a little bit there. Before you know
Absolutely.
it, you're facing major taxes that restrain the economy.
Absolutely. And what we need to do is to increase the economic activity, to refrain from government spending, and to refrain, in fact, lower some tax rates and fees on businesses in the state so we send
fees,
the right message.
Do you think you could also possibly lower the income tax? Would you think of that?
I'd like to think we could.
To what? From 3% to what? Any thoughts?
I'd love to see it lowered, but I think mostly what we have to do is work on attracting business investment to Illinois by reducing the cost of doing business. I'll give you an example. You're an attorney, and you probably have created a limited liability corporation. I, in my business, create limited liability corporations. My accountant, CFO, asked me 2 weeks ago, where do you want me to create this limited liability corporation? I looked at her puzzled and I said, well, Illinois. And she said, I just wondered because in Indiana, it's dramatically less to create a limited liability corporation than it is in Illinois.
Less in what sense? Less in the
well, it's
corporation
$90
fee?
to
The incorporation fee is less.
an annual, And here, it's over $250.
So are you going to incorporate, so to speak, out of Illinois?
No.
Offshore?
No.
We'll call you offshore, Billy?
I'm a believer in Illinois, and I'm going to.
But your point is you're losing business to
But there are
Illinois,
people
Indiana,
who aren't
will
as
do that.
committed to Illinois as
Right.
I am,
Okay.
and we shouldn't be taxing Illinois businesses more than what Indiana or Missouri is. And because we are, we've lost business to those states, and it's cost our state economically, and we need to correct that.
What about gaming? Would you like to see an expansion of gaming? Would that be a kind of revenue enhancement that you could tolerate?
Gaming's not going to solve our fiscal problems. It's not.
The Chicago casino, would that help?
I don't know that it helps
Would you
or
oppose
hurts.
it? Do you oppose a Chicago
I've
casino?
never supported an expansion of gaming. We've had other issues for Chicago casinos that have been up, and so far I haven't been
Judy
able to find
Bardapinka
one.
did when she was running for governor. Didn't she support a Chicago casino?
I'm not sure. My point
You
being
differ
is,
from Topinka, is that what you're
well,
saying?
my record is pretty clear where I've been.
You oppose gaming all the time, or an expansion of gaming?
I've opposed every bill that's been put in front of me.
Well, you know, people talk about a capital plan. We haven't had one in the state for 9 years. Some people think it's terrible. Some think it's not so bad.
It is terrible.
It is terrible.
It's terrible. It's hurt us economically. This is an area where we have billions of dollars sitting in Washington, D.C. that could be used to rebuild or maintain our transportation system. This not only has a direct impact on the public safety.
You can't get it because you
on
don't have the
public
matching Illinois funds, right?
But we do. Governor Blagojevich has increased spending by nearly $7 billion. The difference is he hasn't focused on the priorities that
But you
our
do need
state
a
should
nearly
focus on.
source to finance that capital
You said
plan.
it before, we've got $60 billion. We need to reprioritize
So you don't.
the $60 billion, nearly $60 billion in revenue that the taxpayers entrust us with every year, and that frankly, the Democratic control in this state has failed them.
So you don't think, some people say a sale of the lottery or a long-term lease of the lottery would bring in enough money for you to finance a capital plan? Do you agree with that or disagree?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think that there are some areas where we could right-size state government by selling off assets as long as we don't take the infusion in cash and squander it in a
So you would
short-term
consider
way.
that? You would consider a capital plan financed by a long-term lease of the lottery?
If it made long-term sense. Just as I would think that we ought to look at any area that maybe we could privatize or right-size government to provide the resources.
Can you
and it
trust the
depends on
governor
return.
to, that's the other part, if you have a capital plan, the governor has to release the funds for projects around the state. Can you trust him to do that, or do you need memoranda of understanding that essentially is a contract that says the governor will do as he's promised?
I don't know that we can trust this governor or this administration.
So you need memoranda of
We
understanding?
certainly need memorandum of understanding. But like Ronald Reagan said when dealing with the Russians, trust but verify. We have to make sure that when we pass a capital plan, that we have the ability within that capital plan to verify that the governor's living up to what he's promised, regardless of memorandum of understanding. And if he fails to do so, then we need to be able to pull back.
Is there a new day dawning here in the state legislature with John Cullerton coming in? People say Emil Jones was kind of tied at the hip with the governor, so you couldn't get any negotiation between the speaker and the Senate president.
Oh, I think there's
But now with
absolutely.
John Cullerton, who's from the House, was actually the floor leader for Mike Madigan, so he should have a better relationship with Mike. He says he would have a good relationship with the governor, at least better, because they live in the same area. He talks when he sits here in this chair about they live so close together. You see the governor jogging by his house as Senate President Cullerton's working assiduously
In his house.
his house. But all kidding aside, is there a new day? And with Chris Radogno coming in, some people talk about, I don't know if it's sexist to say, a woman's touch that she may add to the civility. I think Dillard might have said that. I hope I'm not misquoting him. But seriously, I mean, is Radogno, Cullerton now going to get along better with Blagojevich and Speaker Mike Madigan, that group of the four tops and the governor? Do you think there's a change coming?
Absolutely a change. Emil Jones and Rod Blagojevich were locked at the hip. Mike Madigan was with him for about 5 of the 6 years. And then he started to see the light, but frankly it was too late. Now you're going to see Senator Cullerton, who is clearly aligned with Mike Madigan. Let's face it, I think he's the godfather of Mike Madigan's son. So there's a close...
So do you guys call him Godfather when you want something from Senate President Cullerton?
No, but I think clearly you're going to see a change in attitude. And you're going to see this division on one side and Emil Jones being just locked at the hip with the governor. You're going to see a much more independent Senate President of the governor.
Is the Republican Party going to hang tough on not supporting an increase in the income tax or the sales tax, or are you going to face defectors?
I hope we hang tough. I can't believe we won't.
Because even though they don't...
A, it's a part of our party platform. B, is the right thing to do.
You said you hope, but I mean, you know these folks, they're your colleagues.
I believe so. I believe so.
You think the 22 state senators will hang tough?
I do.
Radogno will put up a tough front. She's not going to support anybody who's backing off and defecting and
I think that we'll hang
supporting
tough.
an increase in taxes.
I think Chris Radogno will make a good leader, but the point being is we have a very independent caucus of very fiscally conservative Republicans, all 22 of us.
But
and I don't care who the leader is. Our caucus is going to stand strong in opposition to increasing taxes on families and on businesses in this state.
Is Blagojevich going to get indicted? Is that kind of a hangover of what's happening as you go back to session in January? Might he be indicted in January of 2009? And if so, does that throw everything off, or can Blagojevich continue to function as governor if he's indicted?
I can't predict, but where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of smoke around the Blagojevich administration. Only time will tell that. Does it hamper his ability? Absolutely. I mean, he's wounded by the alleged corruption that he's been involved in, not to mention the convictions that have occurred with people who've been very close to him.
Now you hear stuff about people like John Wyma not wearing a wire, but facilitating wearing a wire, or something like that's reported. He's denied, or his attorney's denied some of that, certainly wearing a wire. But is this going on? We're close friends of Rod Blagojevich, or as they say, worded kind of peculiarly, facilitating wearing of a wire? You know,
like I said, there's.
You're not wired up. Well, you got your mic on there, right?
I've never been asked to be wired, but you know, it's got to be scary for everybody, and it's really unfortunate. At the end of the day, what's the real most unfortunate thing is the corrupt environment which the voters and the citizens of Illinois have had to deal with. It's time to clean this state up. The preoccupation on corruption.
Is that the message you're running on? Time to clean up the state?
Absolutely, in so many ways.
What else? That's number one.
Corruption is one.
What's another?
Job environment.
Number two.
Balancing our budget and living with our means.
That's it?
All important things.
What about education reform?
Absolutely.
Think about that just for a second. We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, State Senator Bill Brady, who it sounds like he's going to be a candidate for governor in 2010, and you're going to have some opponents.
Hopefully not.
Joe Burkett might be running, state's attorney of DuPage County.
Joe Burkett would make a great attorney general candidate.
Dan Rutherford, who ran for Secretary of State, colleague of yours in the State Senate, he might run.
I'd like to see Dan on the ticket, and I think either Secretary of State or Comptroller or Treasurer would be great.
Jim Durkin, State Rep, might be running.
I don't know. Jim, we're also going to need a United States Senate candidate.
Yeah, Peter Roskam for that? Congressman
Maybe,
Peter Roskam?
Maybe, or
Congressman Mark Kirk?
Mark Kirk. Back to education.
Yeah,
one of the major points, I think.
Give me some reform in education. We only got 2 minutes.
We have got to expand charter schools. Some of the best indications of success we've had, particularly within the Chicago school system, is when the Latino community comes in and uses charter schools to
expand
provide
charter schools. What about school voucher, school choice, at least in principle? I know it's difficult, what you said politically.
Yeah. And you know,
but if you could overcome that.
And you know that I supported vouchers in the Chicago school system.
And you still would if you could do it?
Where I think it's broken, I would.
In the Chicago public schools, where we spend $16,000 per kid per year. Did you know that?
I do.
And
the results are abysmal.
Do you think somebody could take that $16,000 and give it to a private school and do much better?
I do.
And you would support that in the Chicago public schools?
As I said, I have.